Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Hope everyone is just having a wonderful Tuesday afternoon out there. Listen, I know yesterday, PJ, you weren't here, but yesterday I know things got heated.
Ooh.
Cam was bringing up Justin Fields.
Oh, no.
I could even get on the more touchier subject today.
I'm happy I wasn't here.
We were in our fields yesterday, but it's okay. We're back. And we're going to work through them, and we're going to talk, and we're going to expand the college football horizons a little bit and look at some of the other really fun bowl games. That's what I was trying to steer us yesterday, but Cam just wanted to go into the doldrums because, PJ, what we were saying is the Georgia fan base went through a really unique experience on Saturday where you kind of let yourself fall into the trap of, all right, this might actually be the year. We got this amazing defense. We can go out there and do it. We're undefeated. We're the first team that went number one to number one in the college football playoff, like from the initial rankings until the end of the regular season. First team to go 1-1, right?
Yeah.
So you let yourself fall into it. But also going into the SEC championship, you knew this is Alabama. They're really good. There's a chance we lose this game. And if we do lose it, you know what? We're still in the college football playoff. But at the same time, you want to go ahead and beat Alabama.
Just get them out of the way.
So just a unique experience. And then the way you lost. It was like nightmare scenario. And I know I'm not trying to pat myself on the back here, but I mean, I kind of laid out all the scenarios where Stetson Bennett has to be the one who wins you the game. Your defense, who hasn't been tested in the secondary, they have blown coverages. We kind of laid it out. It was the polar opposite of everything you'd seen all year, right? What was the formula all year? Great defense. Stetson throwing the ball about 20 times, completing 14 of those, running for about 200 and getting out of there, right? You weren't able to do any of that.
Right.
So you just had this rough performance, but at the same time, you're like, we just got our teeth kicked in, but we're still going to the college football playoffs and are playing a 2-game season to win a national championship.
You have a month to correct it too.
That's that too. So it was just kind of it's a unique emotional kind of blender going on there. But Cam made the mistake, and I think I know why he is so in his feels about like shoulders hunched over, chin down. I feel like what's the dog whisperer's name where he's like trying to tell you like the emotion of the dog, and he's like, look, his chin's down, his ears are pinned back, just the body language, right?
I could get deeper
the body, but I think I know why you're feeling like this, Cam, is you couldn't react because you made the mistake of going out in public to watch that game.
Ooh.
I'm trying to switch up something different.
No, you weren't. No, but are you okay? First question: are you ever going to do it again?
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how we could win because if I stay home, it's punishment again. If you stay home, you can let the depression and just the pressure and just all of it just like soak in. Whereas if you're out in public, you have to pretend like it's not affecting you like that. No, I mean that was the cool thing. Shout out to Coach's Corner. It's just a nice environment where you could just
coaches is great.
Yeah, you could be yourself. So it was plenty of Georgia fans.
I don't care where you invite. I don't care if it's like, hey, you can watch the game at Buckingham Palace. I'm gonna be watching the game from my couch.
Right?
Nah, I tried to switch things up and be like,
well, how'd that go, Cam?
Well, it hasn't gone good for 15 years. So it just hasn't gone good. I'm such a nerd with this.
You want to switch something up? You switch on whether or not you have the lucky lamp on. You guys have a lucky lamp in your house where if the lamp's on and your team's cooking, then you don't touch the lamp. But if your team starts getting smoked a little bit, or you turn off the lamp and then all of a sudden they get a 3 and out, you're like, oh, see, it was the lamp.
I don't know, man. You think about my team the past 4 or 5 years, you ask me again if I have a lucky lamp or not.
Well, maybe
it's not working.
Missing.
If I do, it's not working. For sure. But understandable. Yeah.
I'm last night looking and I'm going in depth with wide receiver core and running backs and who has the better position groups out of Michigan and Georgia. I'm just like,
okay, well, PJ's our Big 10
let's
expert.
slow down there. Yeah,
PJ's our Big 10 expert. He has been all season. This is the only place in South Georgia where you can get live over the air Big 10 breakdown like this.
Reluctant, yeah.
But just great Big 10 breakdown. You've watched both teams pretty closely this year, PJ. Who should be the favorite going into this game?
Going into Michigan, Georgia?
Yeah.
Still. I
think they're 7.5 point favorites as of right now.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. I'm maybe a little surprised it's not a little bigger, but the reason
when you get smacked 41-20.
Yeah, understandable. That's going to happen. But like the reason why it's not obviously is because the same thing that I've been saying all year. If someone's been taking notes about the things I've been saying about the Big Ten, they probably don't think I'm.
I hope
they're
there's someone
not
out there.
I hope they're not.
Like a burner Twitter account that says
Right.
PJ's Big Ten takes.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been calling it. I called Michigan a fraud all year, and then the last 3 weeks of the season, like I mean, even going to the Big Ten championship.
PJ like drops the F word all the time.
Yeah, even going to the Big Ten championship game, I was like, nah, it's going to be tight. Like they're going to play them close, and then they surprised me again. They come out and really kick Iowa's teeth in. Like, so they are playing very, very well. But again, I think the month gives their running back room some time to get a little bit more healthy, even more healthy. Sure.
That is something they have in the Big Ten that they do not have in the SEC, Cam, and that is a running back room.
Yeah.
See, in the SEC, they have running back rooms.
Right. Of course.
They don't have running back rooms.
They might have running back rooms.
I got a good question.
Wait a minute. You're not allowed to do that.
Last night, I was just thinking, what position groups are Georgia better than Michigan at?
Stop it.
I'm just asking.
Stop it.
No, I'm asking. Running back group is not even close. It's Michigan.
No, let's do it.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Let's do
Go
it.
look at Michigan real quick.
I mean, they've had some really good games.
No, I'm talking about this year.
No, he did
two
this thing.
backs.
He did this thing yesterday where he compared the two backs from Michigan to Sony Michel and Nick Chubb.
Oh, I'll give you a stat. Nick,
Stats
I'm not
wait,
saying
wait.
I'm not saying they're bad. They're really good running backs.
I wouldn't compare them to Sony and Nick Chubb. What I would say is the stats are comparable. 23 games, 2,300 yards, 31 touchdowns. Sony and Nick Chubb, 29 games, 2,600 yards, 31 touchdowns.
Sony
So they
Michel
played
and Nick
6
Chubb.
less games
No, but
and only 300
Sony
yards
Michel
less.
and Nick Chubb are literally the most prolific rushing duo in the
I'm not
history
saying they're better, but
of
stat
college
wise,
football.
they're 6 games behind and only 300 yards behind in the same amount of touchdowns.
All right.
It's Michigan's running back group is elite. Go look at
they've had some dang good games.
Haskins.
So we know
backup,
Haskins really
you
sucks.
wanted to do this, and I'll give you running backs, even though I think if you put Zamir White and James Cook in that offense, if you put those guys in that offense, they're probably doing very similar things.
I think comparable at very least.
Yeah, but that being said, like they're not the focal points of this Georgia offense, right? Those two guys are the focal points of that Michigan offense. But again, so if you want to take the running backs, fine. I think Georgia has a better offensive line than Michigan. A lot of people, for whatever reason, think the offensive line's been bad for Georgia. I think the offensive line's been one of the stronger points of this Georgia team. I mean, Georgia was second in the SEC in sacks given up.
I don't know if it's better because Michigan has actually, and I can't believe I'm saying this, Michigan's actually played a harder schedule. They've played better teams. I don't know if it's a better O-line. You manhandled Ohio State. In my opinion, I watched the whole Michigan State game. They manhandled Michigan State on the O-line.
Well, they did, but they just Michigan.
They just Michigan fumbled snaps and all that, but O-line, they handled them. Then you play Penn State.
So we seen a push on the offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, I would say offensive lines are even.
Sounds like Cam's wearing a big yellow M on his chest.
No,
right now.
It's just
we know he has a shirt.
Yeah.
No, I think.
Well, no,
for the most part, we are kind of.
No, you asked the question: what position groups is Georgia better than Michigan?
I don't think O-line. I think O-line's even. I think running back.
Okay, what about quarterback?
Quarterback. Oh, Georgia. I give
like
Georgia
Cade McNamara is Cade McNamara.
Yeah,
I think even with
Georgia
Stetson Bennett, like whatever you think his limitations are out there, we spoke about this yesterday, and we're going to get more into Stetson today. So we had some people send us some messages after the show. They're like, "You guys were super hard on Stetson." I thought it was very fair.
No, you were fair
on Stetson yesterday, and I at no point because someone was like, "You just want JT." I literally said yesterday there's a distinct chance that JT. Well, it's like it's people hear something and make the next jump.
Yeah, we all have said Stetson Bennett could be every team in the country. We just don't know about Bama, and that's still that's a valid.
Well, we're gonna get to that. So I'd say quarterbacks. Stetson, if you want to argue Cade McNamara, fine, we can call that a push, whatever. Wide receivers, I think Georgia, especially if George Pickens comes back, I think that's Georgia. Tight ends, it's very clearly Georgia. I don't know if anybody else in the country has that better. Flip over defensively, I'm going to make this two different things.
I say the D-line might be Michigan.
I'm going to make this two different things because I think this is fair. Interior defensive line is Georgia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I don't think it's close.
Okay.
Right.
Edge rushers, Michigan, I think it's clearly Michigan, and I think they get after the quarterback in two different ways.
Yep.
Michigan likes to get you in one-on-ones with their elite edge rushers. Georgia just schemes the hell out of you, right? With those interior the inside linebacker blitzes, and they're not even really blitzes because you're dropping off an outside linebacker and you're only sending 4. But Georgia throws a lot of stunts at you, and they just throw a lot of window dressing at you, right? So they get pressure in different ways. So I think interior defensive line is clearly Georgia. Edge rushers, yeah. With Aiden Hutchinson and that crew, it's those guys, even though we're going to get into a conversation about Aiden Hutchinson as well. Linebackers is Georgia, and it's not really close.
Yeah,
you have the Butkus Award winner, and then a couple other guys are going to be drafted within the first 2 rounds.
Adam Anderson, I had his issue. You can
I
add him
think
to that
the
fold as
secondary,
it might be even, and I say that because Michigan has played some really, I think what I'm most scared of is Michigan is battle tested, and we saw kind of like the same thing with Alabama. They're battle tested, and they were kind of like.
I think if you're like looking at it from like if you're looking at it from like the vacuum or just like from a non-biased situation, is you would say I guess PJ would be the perfect person to ask this. Let's say that 5 times fast. Looking at Georgia and looking at Michigan, Cam said, okay, Michigan's battle tested. Is that an advantage coming in? I would say the bigger advantage is Georgia was pretty clearly the most consistent team all year. I wouldn't say they're ever the best. I felt like there's teams that were kind of like up and down all year. Like peak Ohio State was probably better at some points than Georgia was, just because Georgia probably wouldn't have been able to keep up with them on the scoreboard, right? Peak Alabama, as we saw, was better than Georgia, or whatever you want to call it, on Saturday, right? But Georgia was the most consistent team.
Yeah.
They just got punched in the mouth.
Yeah.
And so now they have to go back to the drawing board and say, what works, what doesn't work, what do we have to do? So are you more concerned about the team that's kind of trending in the right direction, won 2 big games to close out the season, or the team that won 12 games in a row, pretty clearly had the best defense in the country and just got punched in the mouth?
More worried in the sense of like I'm scared to play them,
for whatever that's worth. Which one of those holds more weight?
I'd much rather I'd much rather be in
coaches on either team. Which one worries you more?
Georgia, absolutely, because especially if you look at, I think it's comparable to if you look at Michigan's trajectory and compare it and kind of do the same thing for Georgia, right? Michigan was okay up and down. Like Georgia was very, very consistent all year, like you've been saying. Michigan was like, all right, up and down, dominating people like Wisconsin, and then winning close against a couple other, somewhat okay teams, right? And then they go in, they have the lead, they're dominating Michigan State, and then everything falls apart. Like you just said about Georgia, they go back to the drawing board, look at those things, what fell apart, what were we doing right, what were we doing wrong, and guess what? Our backs are up against the wall now, and we have 3 games to finish this off, and if we don't, we're 9-3 again and going to, the Outback Bowl. And guess what? They put everything together, beat one of the best teams in the country, beat a really tough defense there in Penn State, and then show the world what Iowa really is. So, like,
what are they?
They have a really
they have a pretty good defense. Describe Iowa in one word.
Fraud.
Yeah.
Yeah. If anyone even believed in them in the first place. Anyway, no. So look at that. Now they also just
probably believed in them.
Right.
I don't know.
They also just what worries me
Dad's
about
in the crowd,
Michigan
like,
too,
I don't know, babe. Like,
right now is like they just caught lightning in a bottle for 3 or 4 games, and anyone can say, okay, yeah, keep doing that throughout this month break, and then bring it into the playoffs. That's a lot tougher, I think, than people think. Now, whereas with Georgia, if you do what Michigan just did, I mean, that's a lot of possibility. If you can execute and look at those things that you did not do right on Saturday against Alabama and apply them over the next month and be completely ready for Michigan and most likely Alabama next, that is scary to me because you have everything, in my eyes, in place. You just need to go back to the drawing board and like you kind of alluded to there. I think you got A+ Alabama. I think you got like C+, B- Georgia. If Georgia goes back, fixes those things that made them C+ on Saturday and goes back to A+ Georgia that we've seen most of the year. Yeah, I'm scared about that.
And I think, and again, this isn't Georgia homerism. I think it's just watching the game is if you go back and watch that game, Alabama won in the margins. Like everybody's gonna think about the Jameson Williams long touchdowns, and that's why, or Bryce Young and all the yards in the first half. But think about it. Kevin always does the Al Pacino from Any Given Sunday. It's a game of inches. You got to claw for those inches, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Alabama's driving, I think it was before their third touchdown, they're driving, and Devonta Wyatt punches the ball out of Bryce Young's arms.
Yep.
If you're Nolan Smith, you got to fall on the football.
Yeah.
Right. If you get that, then I think Anthony Trace, our friend from PFF, put it out. At that point in the game, Alabama had a 71% win probability. If Georgia recovers that, it's a 51%. It goes back to an even split in that game right there. Right. Yeah. And then in terms of the other stuff, right, where like Jameson Williams' first touchdown, that's 3rd and 2. And he breaks off a 70-yard touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That's 3rd and 2. If you get them to throw an incompletion there or stuff a run, you're getting the football back. And that's not just completely flipping the game. And I think at that point it was 10-0.
Yeah.
And you're getting the football back. If you go up potentially
17.
3 scores on Alabama, does that completely change everything? So it's Alabama, and this is a Nick Saban coach team. Alabama won the margins, right? And then when you started to get shaky, Stetson started trying to force some footballs. It is what it is. And speaking of Stetson, I want to talk about him when we come back, because again, we got some messages yesterday, people saying you're really hard on Stet. There's equal blame to be thrown around everywhere. Again, this is all relative because most teams lose to Alabama.
Yeah,
it's freaking Alabama.
What you should say also is this is what we do though. We're not here to just praise all that. When you play good, we got you. When things happen, we're here to dissect and criticize a little bit. It's nothing personal. We don't.
I told everybody who messaged me yesterday, I appreciate you listening, because if you are complaining about it, that means you were listening. Yeah. I appreciate you listening. I want to go back because I think there's a lot of blame to be thrown around. I think a lot of it falls on Stetson. I think a lot of it falls on Todd Monken. But I think you can and again, this is a result of losing to Alabama. I think you can heap a little bit of this on Kirby Smart as well. So I want to dive into that when we come back as to why I think you can put some of the blame for Georgia's offensive struggles on Kirby Smart's feet after Saturday. We'll dive into that when we come back. We're also going to get into some Heisman discussions as well, because I think somebody got snubbed that should absolutely be going to New York. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko and Cameron Ursher. We'll be right back after this. All right, so we kind of teased this in the last segment. I guess set it up in the last segment. Where do you lay the blame for the performance of the team? I mean, you got BJ Bennett getting fired up trying to defend folks in the office. I mean, everybody's real sensitive about this SEC championship game. And I know, like we said in the last segment, nothing gets people more fired up one way or the other than saying Stetson Bennett. Either you are ready to throw a brick through a wall because you are just you're sick of seeing Stet out there, or you're ready to die on the Stetson Bennett got us here, he's our quarterback hill, right? There's no in between. I think there's a lot of in between.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things you can talk about, but I said at the end, I think there's a few people you can blame for the offensive performance, because I know you see 41 points and so you immediately go to defense. Alabama scored 24 points in one quarter. They scored on 5 consecutive drives. But what Cam and I talked about was inside of that, there were 3 drives from Georgia that were 3 plays.
Yeah.
2 3-and-outs where you put the defense right back on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And then 1 that was a touchdown. But again, it was quick. 3 plays, touchdown, right? I'm looking at this, and like we said in the last segment, it's a C+ performance, and you just can't have that against Alabama. But whose fault was it? It wasn't just Stetson Bennett's fault. He almost threw the ball 50 times in the game. You can't expect him to just go do that. And Brooks Austin kind of alluded to this as well, is when this is where I think it could be Kirby Smart's fault. When you are beating up Florida, when you're handling South Carolina, when you're beating up on UAB, when you're up on these teams, when you're up on Kentucky, right, who's got a good defense, when you're up on these teams, you can't just pack it in and hand the football off 30 times in the second half and get out.
Yeah.
Go back and watch what Joe Burrow did. Go back and watch what Mac Jones did. Go back and watch what all of these coaches have done with these quarterbacks. And it's, if I know I'm going to need you to throw the football 40 times eventually to win a game, I'm going to let you throw it 40, 50 times in a game where you don't have to, just so you can find that rhythm offensively, right? But Georgia's whole thing this year, and this is how you set all kinds of defensive records, I guess if that's what is important, is you run the football in the second half and you just get off the field, right? You're done. You try to make it a 30-minute second half, just get out of there with your 27-point win.
Mm-hmm.
Versus allowing your offense and your wide receivers, your tight ends, letting your offensive line get better in pass pro, let your running backs get better in pass pro. You let those guys execute when it's not the pressure situations. So when that does arise, you've been there before. Georgia's offense looked like nothing we had seen since second half of the Florida game last year. Why? Because it's a game where you have to score points. Right. And eventually that's going to happen. So again, for people out there, and I know BJ Bennett's one of them, and he's going to get on 3 and Out and tell you this, who say Stetson Bennett played a good game. Stetson Bennett did not play a good game. And I think Stetson Bennett would be the first person to tell you he did not play a good game, right? He threw for 340 yards. He threw for 3 touchdowns. Absolutely. He was picked off twice in crucial situations. And I told Cam, some of them that were almost as bad as interceptions, because when you think about it, you're punting, is Alabama scores a touchdown and you can't hit James Cook on a 7-yard out route or flare to the sideline, and that goes incomplete, and you're punting the ball right back to Bryce Young. How is that any different than a 40-yard interception down the field?
And it's a couple more passes he made that could have been picks as well. First drive should have been a pick, right? But again, I'm not just trying to hammer Stetson Bennett here, right? The wide receivers couldn't get open. I mean, George Pickens, even when he had his big catch down the sideline, was double covered. He just did George Pickens things, right? And hopefully you see him more and more as Georgia goes through these bowl practices. But that being said, it's not just on Stetson, but it's okay to go back and say Stetson Bennett did not play a good football game. And it also raises the question, every single time you've had to see him and shoulder the weight, he hasn't been able to do it. And I don't think that's just his fault. I think Georgia as a program isn't built for that. Georgia's built to get in, as Brooks said yesterday, a rock fight, and eventually you crumble, and like a python, they just kind of take over and choke you out, and eventually they win by 15 in some of these games, right? Like, look at the Florida game. Florida shut down Georgia's offense until the defense was able to turn Florida over a few times, and you score, 3 touchdowns within 2 minutes?
Yeah, everything fell apart.
Yeah, it was 3-0 with like 3 minutes left to go in that game, and you go into halftime 24-0.
Yep.
Right. It's kind of what Georgia does against teams like Alabama.
That's not happening.
It's not going to happen. I don't know about Michigan and Cincinnati.
I don't think Michigan. I don't think, and I don't think Cincinnati
but the pressure comes not from the defensive side. The pressure from Alabama comes from we got to keep up.
Yeah.
We got to match.
Yeah.
Michigan doesn't have that offense.
No, I don't.
What Michigan does well is what Georgia defends well.
Yeah.
Historically well. So I don't think Michigan matches up well when it comes to that. I think you can throw Stetson Bennett out there and he can have that same game he had against Alabama and you can win the football game.
Agreed.
I think you can throw Stetson Bennett out there and he can go 14 for 19 for 185 yards and 3 touchdowns like he does, and you'll win that football game because Michigan probably isn't scoring 24 points on Georgia. Right?
I don't know.
I know you're nervous about this, but I'm looking at it realistically as to what Georgia defends well versus what Michigan tries to run their offense through. And if you're saying the 2 best players on their team are running backs, that's going to be a long day.
And while he impressed me in some of the bigger games this year, Cade McNamara is no Bryce Young.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, that, yeah, so
I think that is the understatement of the year.
Yeah.
But again, you can't just lay this on one person's feet, right? You can't do it. But I think there's a lot of it where you have to kind of go around and reevaluate. And that's why I don't think just throwing JT Daniels in there fixes anything. Because when was the last time he took significant reps in a game?
Yeah.
Like actually got to throw the football around in a game. I think, what was it? Who was the FCS team? Charleston Southern. He got to throw it around against them a little bit.
And I want to say he threw it. Did he not?
Yeah, he threw an interception.
Yeah.
But it was either them or Missouri. I'm now mixing up my late third quarter Georgia blowout JT Daniels appearances at the end of the season. But either way, in those games, it was a majority of him handing the football off.
Yeah. And
when he did throw, it was behind. And he did get picked off in one of those games on just throwing behind somebody. Right. So it's just, I don't know that just throwing JT Daniels in there is the solution.
Right. I think honestly, it might be.
Beckett threw a pick against Charleston.
Well, yeah, Beck threw a pick pretty much every time he came in.
Yeah, but JT, I mean, he had the touchdown, but that was pretty much the last game. I will say it like this: I do think Michigan and Georgia are the exact same teams. One team is, just because Georgia lost doesn't mean they're just not riding high. I still think Georgia has a lot of momentum, and Michigan clearly has a lot of momentum. So I think it's going to be a good game. I just don't want people disrespecting. I'm not saying you are, but you know there's people out there, we'll skate past Michigan easy.
No, you can't look past Michigan. They're one of the 4 best teams in the country. But
I don't think so.
Gene Clemens writes in, he says, if your team is built on defense and a run game, then you can't get into a game and let your quarterback throw the ball a million times, then blame him when neither one of the first 2 things were effective. All right. That's literally what we've been saying for the past 2 days.
Yeah.
Right. But where I think a lot of Georgia fans are going and a lot of the national media that are clamoring for JT Daniels is this. There have been games in the past where the game plan to stop Georgia is, we know they have a good defense, right? We have to beat their offense to have a chance in this game, right? We're not just going to be able to go and outscore them. We have to beat their offense. I'm not saying that's the case for Alabama, but this has been the case for a lot of teams. So what did a team like Mississippi State do? What did Cincinnati do? They put 9 guys in the box and said, you're not going to run the football. We are going to sell out to stop the run. You're going to have to beat us over the top. And you're going to have to do it consistently. And Georgia was able to do that against Mississippi State. I think JT Daniels went for 400 yards actually in both of these games.
I'm looking up
Mississippi State and Cincinnati. Mississippi State
against Cincinnati.
Yeah, Mississippi State, it was like Georgia scored like 35 points. Cincinnati, you only were able to put up
24.
Yeah, 24 points. And
but
I think that was
392. And you couldn't get the ground game going. And we know it wasn't a pretty 392.
But Cincinnati
scheme,
but Cincinnati has a really good defense, as we've
14.
seen.
As we've seen,
they came back. Yeah, they came back this year undefeated, and they're relying on that defense. If a team is going to say, this is what we talk about at every level of football, you have to be able to take what the defense gives you. Yep. If the defense is going to load the box and say you're not running, Cam kind of said yesterday, you just got to be able to run against that. I just don't think that's realistic, especially with the way football is anymore. There's no more like FU, I'm running the football teams anymore.
Yeah.
Like it isn't how it goes. Is you have to be able to take what that defense gives you. And if they're going to stack the box, which I guarantee you Michigan's idea is, if they see number 13 running out there, they're going to say, hey, he has to beat us. I'm not saying he can't. I'm not saying he can't.
Yeah, no.
I mean, ask UAB how that goes in the first half, where he throws like 5 touchdowns in 6 attempts.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you were the same one. Let's remind people too that you were the same one. What 2-3 weeks ago that brought up that he was the best quarterback or one of the biggest quarterbacks when it comes to average yards per pass.
Yards per attempt. Yeah.
Or yards
He's
per
not
attempt.
just a check down guy.
I mean, no, not at all. So I mean, like let's remind people of that. I mean, we've been clamoring for Stetson all year, and we're not changing that by any
I still
means.
think he's a top 5 quarterback in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, Bryce Young, Matt Corral, Will Rogers.
Mm-hmm. I think he's right there.
I think Stetson's better than Hendon Hooker. You put Stetson Bennett in that Tennessee offense, he's throwing for like 600 yards a game.
Nah.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, man.
Nah.
Yeah, I think Hooker. Cam, come on, man. I think Stetson Bennett is very clearly a better quarterback than Hendon Hooker.
Nah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, I guess we're not gonna push you off of it, but you ain't pushing me off of that either way.
No,
but again, point being, where you're sitting at right now as a Georgia fan base is defense obviously has some stuff to fix. I think the defense is a little bit easier to fix than the offense because you can go back and say, Lewis, you can't just jump on a drag route on 3rd and 2 when you have a linebacker there anyway and vacate a 20-yard spot in the field, right? You can talk to Keely Ringo. He's a freshman. He can't get beat on double moves. Not Christopher Smith. We're not really talking about him a lot. He was banged up. I don't think that's an excuse. It was a shoulder, not his legs. And you just cannot, you can't get beat deep if you're the free. Like you just, it can't happen. So there's a whole lot of blame that can go around. But I think it's easier to fix the defense than a philosophy as a football team offensively, which is you can't just go back and play those games and let Stetson throw it 40 times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the adjustment is, and what I think will be concerning is if you get into this game against Michigan and you see the same formula,
right?
Unless you're just hiding it and you're going to save something for Alabama, which that usually hasn't worked out when you try to get tricky against Alabama in the past. Or Cincinnati. I am not discounting Cincinnati. We're going to talk about that in the future as well.
But it also usually doesn't work out when you don't. I mean, think about it in early games. Let's say you have one game earlier in the season that's kind of tough, and then you have one of those big premier matchups like top 5. Most of the time, from my experience of watching teams that don't try to do too much in that first game, they don't look very good.
Yeah.
So, like, if you go into Michigan, you're like, well, I'm going to keep some back for Alabama. That's not a good recipe for success
I don't know
against
if you
Michigan.
really hold back against a top 14.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's
what I will credit you is this. I forget it. We do have not a month, about 2-3 weeks to prepare for Michigan. I do think that defense will be a hell of a lot better when they play Michigan because you get 2 weeks, 18 days, something like that to prepare.
Well, I think Kirby Smart said they weren't going to practice again until this coming Saturday.
And that's fine
because they had finals coming up this week. And also you just got done with a 13-week season, banged up, got a lot of dudes with some lingering injuries. So they're going to get started coming up on Saturday with all the prep. Obviously they've been meeting already, but at this point in the season, if you don't know how to tackle, you just don't know how to tackle, right? So a lot of it's just team meetings and scheme and all that. But like getting back out on the field, that's going to be coming up a little bit later this week. But again, we've talked about this game ad nauseum. We're obviously going to go back and talk about it some more. I want to talk about some Heisman Trophy stuff. We're going to do that when we come back next, right here on ESPN Radio. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. Christian Gokel alongside PJ Zuko and Cam Ursery. The Heisman Trophy, as it is currently constituted, kind of sucks.
It's not great.
I know it is hallowed ground. I know it is the preeminent player trophy in college football. I know a lot of people say to me it's the best player in college football, even though the Heisman Trust says it means the most outstanding player in college football. And there is a thing called a group of Heisman voters out there who determine who wins the Heisman every year. The issue I have with that is it is literally impossible for everyone to watch every player every year. And so what it becomes is which quarterback had the coolest stat line, or if you have a guy who just does something so freaky that everyone on Twitter freaks out about it and is just so astronomical, you have to recognize it, i.e. Devonta Smith last year. You have to recognize him with the Heisman Trophy. But year in and year out, it's become a quarterback award. Mm-hmm. It's just the nation's quarterback with the coolest stats is what it's become. And it's probably going to be that again this year, right? Bryce Young's going to win the Heisman just based off of his first half performance against Georgia.
Yep.
Right? For most outstanding player. I think that sucks about it is football is the ultimate team sport. How many great quarterbacks have we seen play on just atrocious teams?
Plenty.
Yeah, just not win anything.
Yep.
In college, right? And it just leaves out the guys who don't have the metrics, right? Like there's no metrics for offensive linemen, really not for interior defensive linemen. But this year we do have a defender going to New York. One of the 4 finalists is Aiden Hutchinson, defensive end from Michigan, and he's had a really, really impressive season. Is it mind-boggling? No. Is it any different than stats we see from at least a couple guys at every conference every year? No. And so I'm really curious as to why Aiden Hutchinson went there. And I hate like supporting a group and then pitting 2 of them against each other. But Aiden Hutchinson's stats for the year, he has 13 sacks. That's impressive. It's a sack a game. He played 13 games. He got a sack a game. He had 15.5 tackles for loss. He had 58 total tackles. It's a really good season for a defensive end. If you can get a sack a game, probably double or triple that in pressures from him, he is an impactful football player. And just based off his sign speed, he's going to be drafted, inside the top 4? You think?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, he's definitely a top 10 pick at least.
Definitely not making it out of the top 10. Yeah.
Okay, well, there's a guy that plays in Tuscaloosa. There's a guy who plays in Tuscaloosa named Will Anderson. Remember the stats I just gave you about Aiden Hutchinson. 15.5 tackles for loss, 13 sacks, right? Will Anderson has 27.5 tackles for loss.
Mm-hmm.
And 14 sacks.
I already know what that is.
So one more sack than Aiden Hutchinson and 12 more tackles for loss.
Yeah.
Alabama treatment.
And almost 30 more tackles than him. I'm curious as to why if he's the defender you want to recognize, why is it him?
Right.
And I think I know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's because he's draft eligible and Will Anderson isn't.
And because he plays for Michigan, and Michigan's finally relevant.
I mean, probably.
Yeah, it looks probably cool with the cool helmets, and they're relevant.
Well, yeah, and I think you made a good point right there when you said it's Alabama. Alabama has so many good defensive linemen that you could go and look at one of them each year and probably go, yeah, he could probably go to New York as a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Yeah,
like Ashawn Robinson, Jaron Reed, those dudes like that. Reggie Ragland. I know he's more of an outside linebacker, but still, like those guys like that. Hightower, like they just always have great defensive linemen that you can point to and say, yeah, he's pretty outstanding.
Yeah,
but it's just there's a was it Andre Brown, the big left guard for Alabama, like in the mid 2000s, like 2007. Was it Smith? Smith. And I think they were playing Georgia, in Tuscaloosa, and they were like, "Coach, what do you need to do more in the second half to get the offense rolling?" It's like you got quarterbacks, you got wide receivers, you got running backs, you got all this cool stuff that win Heisman trophies, right? He said, we need to run behind number 71. Mm-hmm. So that's Nick Saban, the greatest, and I think it's inarguable, the greatest head coach of all time, saying the best player, most impactful player on our team is our guard because he is so physically dominant that if we can go behind him, our whole offense works.
Yeah.
A right guard's never going to win a Heisman Trophy.
Right.
Because there's no stats to keep up with it. So my question is this, and it kind of goes back to the College Football Hall of Fame stuff. And I know this is a really long preamble to let you guys answer, is the College Football Playoff sets these metrics that you have to reach to be, or the College Football Hall of Fame sets these metrics you have to reach to even be considered. If you're a Heisman Trophy voter and you're supposed to be the bastion of handing out the award for the most outstanding player in college football, shouldn't you do a little bit more research than just looking up passing numbers?
Yeah, absolutely.
I promise you they don't do
completely
that.
Agree.
I promise you they don't do that. Because remember, Sue could have won it way back when. I would say Chase Young, to a degree, he messed up his final game. I mean, one of those games in between that final game against Michigan, he could have won it. It's
Miles Garrett,
Tyrann Mathieu, the Honey Badger.
Yeah.
It's a lot of guys that could have won it. And I'm just, like you just said, he has, if we're just looking at stats, he actually has better stats, more sacks, more tackles for loss, and his team's the number one team in the country. And he is the best player in the country, in my opinion.
And this is not a typical Alabama defense where it's like you have 5 guys across the defensive line who are going to go to the NFL.
He's the only dude.
Well, I'm not saying he's the only one, but he is. It's not usually just a focal point and then a bunch of other guys. With this Alabama defense, that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah. I there's a couple things I say I agree with you on, and just one, like, I actually did see something about this earlier. I screenshotted it just in case. And it's not me saying anything negative about Will Anderson at all. It's just a more of a comparison and maybe why Hutchinson's there and he's not. But anyway, I think Anderson's also kind of suffering from a little bit of, which again, this is just media and voters and everything else. If you look back, it's almost like, all right, we have Bryce Young going, and he's probably going to win the Heisman. Do we bring Will Anderson too from Alabama?
Yeah.
Or do we just take who we think is the best player on that team and then spread it out? Which is terrible.
But is that your job as a Heisman voter?
No. That's what I'm saying. That's not what they should be doing by any means. But I think that's one of the other things that he's kind of suffering from.
I don't know, because I think what you're saying there is like that's just the Heisman Trust skewing it. And it's like they've already gotten all the votes in and say, okay, it's Bryce Young by a long shot. And like we're not actually going to go with who got the votes. We're just going to invite people to get more eyeballs. If that's the case, then the whole thing's screwed.
Being nice.
But the whole thing, no, it's not going to be nice. They're just trying to get more eyeballs on it to get more money.
Yeah.
Right? Is say, okay, if we are, like PJ said, we have one guy coming from Alabama already. Well, let's not take another one because they're already going to be watching. Let's take somebody from Michigan. I think if you're being honest with yourself and you're talking about outstanding, it probably is Bryce Young this year. But if you're talking about who should be there, Will Anderson's been much more outstanding than Aiden Hutchinson this year. We got to take a quick break. We'll come back with more right here on Second Down. Second Down on ESPN Radio is presented to you by the Uniform Source. All right, we're gonna do some work here, just a little team meeting on the air. Should we do a bowl pick'em with the fans?
Always, yeah.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I'm down. I'm always down to be wrong about picking games.
All right, so PJ, you're in last place right now.
Yeah, it's terrible
in the picks. I actually haven't tallied up this weekend because I was 3 behind Cody, who doesn't even work here, doesn't watch college football at all, and is somehow just boat racing everybody. But again, I think we do it, but we need some stakes on the line, and I think in the bowl pick'ems, whoever like comes in last place in here, shave the head.
Oh no, yeah, no, that's not gonna happen.
Yeah, I'm good.
No, it doesn't matter.
Come on.
No,
I'm not shaving.
Well, you said steak, so I was thinking like if we win, maybe we get a steak or
buying
something.
steaks.
Yeah,
No.
that'd be great.
No,
that'd be great.
We need
I'm not shaving my head.
We need a punishment for the person who comes in last place in the bowl pick'ems in the office.
I know PJ's not going to do it.
Send your suggestions to @ESPN Coastal, @ESPN Coastal. You can message us on Facebook as well. Send your suggestions. What should the punishment be? I mean, Thomas Steinbach says yes. Like, shave the heads.
Nah.
Sure, because it's not him.
Yeah,
exactly.
No.
It's for the fans.
No.
I'm over here.
We're going to figure it out.
Now.
You can send all of your suggestions again to @ESPN Coastal. 3 and Out coming up next with BJ Bennett, Ben Troop, and Kevin Thomas.